Hello and welcome back to As an Aggregator. In a previous entry, we decided, hey, let's get this, show on the road by talking about different things that were impactful for us on our journey. The hypergraph reference specifically was this course by Dr. Jules White, and it led us to what we wanted to really speak about, or at least to make content on, and that's a prompt pattern catalog to enhance prompt engineering with ChatGPT. For the yellow section, I thought I'd start here naming contributors as seen on the screen, computer science, etc. Okay, so let's jump into this a prompt pattern catalog to enhance prompt engineering with ChatGPT. Okay, so the abstract prompt engineering is an increasingly important skill set needed to converse effectively with large language models, LLMs, such as ChatGPT. Prompts are instructions given to an LLM to enforce rules, automate processes, and ensure specific qualities and quantities of generated output. Prompts are also a form of programming that can customize the outputs and interactions with an LLM. This paper describes a catalog of prompt engineering techniques presented in pattern form that have been applied to solve common problems when conversing with large language models. Prompt patterns are a knowledge transfer method analogous to software patterns since they provide reusable solutions to common problems faced in a particular context, i.e., output generation and interaction when working with large language models. This paper provides the following contributions to research on prompt engineering that apply large language models to automate software development tasks. First, it provides a framework for documenting patterns for structuring prompts to solve a range of problems so that they can be adapted to different domains. Second, it presents a catalog of patterns that have been applied successfully to improve the outputs of LLM conversations. Third, it explains how prompts can be built from multiple patterns and illustrates prompt patterns that benefit from combination with other prompt patterns. Index terms: large language models, prompt patterns, prompt engineering. 1. Introduction. Conversational large language models, LLMs, such as ChatGPT, have generated immense interest in a range of domains for tasks ranging from answering questions on medical licensing exams to generating code snippets. This paper focuses on enhancing the application of large language models in several domains, such as helping developers code effectively and efficiently with unfamiliar APIs or allowing students to acquire new coding skills and techniques. LLMs are particularly promising in domains where humans and AI tools work together as trustworthy collaborators to more rapidly and reliably evolve software-reliant systems. For example, large language models are being integrated directly into software tools such as GitHub's Copilot and included in integrated development environments, IDEs, such as IntelliJ and Visual Studio Code, thereby allowing software teams to access these tools directly from their preferred IDE. A prompt is a set of instructions provided to an LLM that programs the LLM by customizing it, and or enhancing or refining its capabilities. A prompt can influence subsequent interactions with and output generated from an LLM by providing specific rules and guidelines for an LLM conversation with a set of initial rules. In particular, a prompt sets the context for the conversation and tells the LLM what information is important and what the desired output form and context should be. For example, a prompt could specify that an LLM should only generate code that follows a certain coding style or programming paradigm. Likewise, it could specify that an LLM should flag certain keywords or phrases in a generated document and provide additional information related to those keywords. By introducing these guidelines, prompts facilitate more structured and nuanced outputs to aid a large variety of software engineering tasks in the context of LLMs. Prompt engineering is the means by which large language models are programmed via prompts. Very important. To demonstrate the power of prompt engineering, we provide the following prompt. The prompt is as follows. From now on, I would like you to ask me questions to develop a Python application to AWS. When you have enough information to deploy the application, create a Python script to automate the deployment. This example prompt causes ChatGPT to begin asking the user questions about their software application. ChatGPT will drive the question asking process until it reaches a point where it has sufficient information to generate a Python script that automates deployment. This example demonstrates the programming potential of prompts beyond conversational generate a method that does X style prompts or answer this quiz question style prompts. Moreover, prompts can be engineered to program an LLM to accomplish much more than simply dictating the output type or filtering the information provided to the model. With the right prompt, it is possible to create entirely new interaction paradigms, such as having an LLM generate and give a quiz associated with a software engineering concept or tool, or even simulate a Linux terminal window. Moreover, prompts have the potential for self-adaptation, suggesting other prompts to gather additional information or generate related artifacts. These advanced capabilities of prompts highlight the importance of engineering them to provide value beyond simple or code generation, a very important concept to internalize. The authors continue, prompt patterns are essential to effective prompt engineering. A key contribution of this paper is the introduction of prompt patterns to document successful approaches for systematically engineering different outputs and interaction goals when working with conversational LLMs. We focus largely on engineering domain-independent prompt patterns and introduce a catalog of essential prompt patterns to solve problems ranging from production of visualizations and code artifacts to automation of output steps that help fact-check outputs. The remainder of this paper is organized as follows. Section 2 introduces prompt patterns and compares these patterns to well-known software patterns. Section 3 describes 16 prompt patterns that have been applied to solve common problems in the domain of conversational LLM interaction and output generation for automating software development tasks. Section 4 discusses related work, and Section 5 presents concluding remarks and lessons learned. So let's quickly dip into Section 2 and a little bit of a visualization for Section 3. Section 2, comparing software patterns with prompt patterns. Software patterns, prompt patterns. The authors write, the quality of the outputs generated by a conversational LLM is directly related to the quality of the prompts provided by the user. As discussed in Section 1, the prompts given to a conversational LLM can be used to program interactions between a user and an LLM to better solve a variety of problems. One contribution of this paper is the framework it provides to document patterns that structure prompts to solve a range of software tasks that can be adapted to different domains. This framework is useful since it focuses on codifying patterns that can be applied to help users better interact with conversational LLMs in a variety of contexts. Rather than simply discussing interesting examples or domain-specific prompts, codifying this knowledge in pattern form enhances reuse and transferability to other contexts and domains. So let's state that again. Codifying this knowledge in pattern form enhances reuse and transferability to other contexts and domains where users face similar but not identical problems. The topic of knowledge transfer has been studied extensively in the software patterns literature. Footnote or citation, reference 10 and 11. At multiple levels, e.g. design, architectural, and analysis. This paper applies a variant of a familiar pattern form as the basis of our prompt engineering approach. Since prompts are a form of programming, it is natural to document them in pattern form. A. Overview of software patterns. A software pattern provides a reusable solution to a recurring problem within a particular context. Documenting software patterns concisely conveys and generalizes from specific problems being addressed to identify important forces and/or requirements that should be resolved and or addressed in successful solutions. A pattern form also includes guidance on how to implement the pattern, as well as information on the trade-offs and considerations to take into account when implementing a pattern. Moreover, example applications of the pattern are often provided to further showcase the pattern's utility in practice. Software patterns are typically documented in a stylized form to facilitate their use and understanding, such as a name and classification. Each pattern has a name that identifies the pattern and should be used consistently. A classification groups pattern into broad categories, such as creation, structural, or behavioral. So to state that again, we're talking about an overview of software patterns, and we're saying, okay, software patterns are typically documented in stylized form to facilitate their use and understanding. These are some specific instances: a name and classification, the intent, the motivation, the structure and participants, example code, and consequences. So a name and classification, what are we talking about? We're saying each pattern has a name that identifies the pattern and should be used consistently. A classification groups patterns into broad categories. So a classification groups patterns into broad categories such as creational, structural, or behavioral. The intent concisely conveys the purpose the pattern is intended to achieve. The motivation documents the underlying problem the pattern is meant to solve and the importance of the problem. The structure and participants. The structure describes the different pattern participants, such as classes and objects, and how they collaborate to form a generalized solution. Important. Example code. Example code concretely maps the pattern to some underlying programming languages and aids developers in gaining greater insight into how that pattern can be applied effectively. Okay, so example code concretely maps the pattern to some underlying programming language or languages and aids developers in gaining greater insight into how that pattern can be applied effectively. Consequences. Consequences summarize the pros and cons of applying the pattern in practice. B. Overview of prompt patterns. Prompt patterns are similar to software patterns in that they offer reusable solutions to specific problems. They focus more specifically, however, on the context of output generation from large-scale language models, LLMs, such as ChatGPT. Just as software patterns provide a codified approach to solving common software development challenges, prompt patterns provide a codified approach to customizing the output and interactions of LLMs. By documenting and leveraging prompt patterns in the context of automating software development tasks, individual users and teams can enforce constraints on the generated output, ensuring that relevant information is included, and change the format of interaction with the LLM to better solve problems they face. Prompt patterns can be viewed as a corollary to the broad corpus of general software patterns, just adapted to the more specific context of LLM output generation. Prompt patterns follow a similar format to classic software patterns, with slight modifications to match the context of output generation with LLMs. Each of the analogous sections for the prompt pattern form used in this paper is summarized below. A name and classification. The prompt pattern name uniquely identifies the pattern and ideally indicates the problem that is being addressed. For the classification, we have developed a series of initial categories of pattern types, which are summarized in Table 1. and include output customization, error identification, prompt improvement, interaction, and context control. The intent and context describes the problem the prompt pattern solves and the goals it achieves. The problem should ideally be independent of any domain, though domain-specific patterns may also be documented with an appropriate discussion of the context where the pattern applies. The motivation. The motivation provides the rationale for the problem and explains why solving it is important. The motivation is explained in the context of users interacting with a conversational LLM and how it can improve upon users informally prompting the LLM in one or more circumstances. Okay, so let's really focus on this. So many different parts, but the motivation specifically, right? It's providing the rationale. So we're talking about motivation, or we're saying what? Human motivation? Are we saying that an LLM actually has a motivation? What does the use of the term motivation imply? Well, we're not addressing that specifically, but we're talking about the use of this heuristic as a feature of this specific paper. So when this paper is talking about the motivation, it's about providing the rationale for the problem and explains why solving it is important. Rationale for the problem and explains why solving it is important. The motivation is explained in the context of users interacting with a conversational LLM and how it can improve upon users informally prompting the large language model. So informally prompting the large language model in one or more circumstances, specific circumstances where the improvements are expected are documented. The structure and key ideas. The structure describes the fundamental contextual information as a series of key ideas that the prompt pattern provides to the LLM. These ideas are similar to participants in a software pattern. The contextual information may be communicated through varying wording, just as a software pattern can have variations in how it is realized in code, but should have fundamental pieces of information that form a core element of the pattern. So let me repeat that to make sure that I understand what it's saying. The structure and key ideas, okay? The structure describes the fundamental contextual information, such as a series of key ideas that the prompt pattern provides, and these ideas are similar to participants. The contextual information may be communicated through varying wording, okay? Just as a software pattern can have variations in how it is realized in code, but should have fundamental pieces of information that form a core element of the pattern. Example implementation demonstrates how the prompt pattern is worded in practice. Consequences summarize the pros and cons of applying the pattern and may provide guidance on how to adapt the prompt to different contexts. C. Evaluating means for defining a prompt pattern, structure, and ideas. In software patterns, the structure and participants are normally defined in terms of UML diagrams, such as structure diagrams and/or interaction diagrams. These UML diagrams explain what the participants of the pattern are and how they interact to solve the problem. In prompt patterns, something analogous is needed. Though UML may not be an appropriate structural documentation approach, since it is intended to describe software structures, as opposed to ideas to communicate in a prompt. Okay, so in prompt patterns, something analogous is needed. And they're saying, okay, UML may not be an appropriate structural documentation because it's intended to describe software structures as opposed to ideas to communicate in a prompt. Several possible approaches could be used, ranging from diagrams to defining grammars for a prompt language. Although grammars may seem attractive due to their formal nature, they also incur the following challenges. The goal of prompts is to communicate knowledge in a clear and concise way to conversational LLM users who may or may not be computer scientists or programmers. As a community, we should strive to create an approachable format that communicates knowledge clearly to a diverse target audience. It is possible to phrase a prompt in many different ways. It is hard, however, to define a grammar that accurately and completely expresses all the nuanced ways that components of a prompt could be expressed in text or symbols. Prompts fundamentally convey ideas to a conversational LLM and are not simply the production of tokens for input. In particular, the idea built into a prompt pattern can be communicated in many ways, and its expression should be at a higher level than the underlying tokens representing the idea. That's actually an interesting and important takeaway. Prompts fundamentally convey ideas to a conversational LLM and are not simply the production of tokens. So prompts are not simply the production of tokens for input. The production of okay, so prompting, words. Is this the production we're making? Okay, yeah, I'll just make some tokens for input. Okay, this is a prompt. Words. These words are the input. Yeah, let's produce some tokens for input. In particular, an idea built into a prompt pattern can be communicated in many ways, and its expression should be at a higher level than the underlying tokens representing the idea. Leave a response in the comments if you want to think about this sentence, this concept more distinctly. Continuing, the authors write, it is possible to program an LLM to introduce novel semantics for statements and words that create new ways for communicating an idea. In contrast, grammars may not easily represent ideas that can be expressed through completely new symbology or languages that the grammar designer was not aware of. D. A way forward. Fundamental contextual statements. An open research question, therefore, is what approach is more effective than formal grammars for describing prompt pattern structure and ideas? We propose the concept of fundamental contextual statements. Fundamental contextual statements, which are written descriptions of the important ideas to communicate in a prompt to an LLM. An idea can be rewritten and expressed in arbitrary ways based on user needs and experience. The key ideas to communicate, however, are presented to the user as a series of simple but fundamental statements. One benefit of adopting and applying the fundamental contextual statements approach is that it One benefit of adopting and applying the fundamental contextual statements approach is that it is intentionally intuitive to users. In particular, we expect users will understand how to express and adapt the statements in a contextually appropriate way for their domain. Moreover, since the underlying ideas of the prompt are captured, these same ideas can be expressed by the user in alternate symbology or wording that has been introduced to the LLM using patterns such as the meta-language creation pattern presented in section 3b. The authors write, our ultimate goal is to enhance prompt engineering by providing a framework for designing prompts that can be reused and or adapted to other large language models in the same way that software patterns can be implemented in different programming languages and platforms. For the purpose of this paper, however, all prompts were tested with ChatGPT using the ChatGPT Plus service. We use ChatGPT as the LLM for all examples presented in this paper due to its widespread availability and popularity. These examples were documented through a combination of exploring the corpus of community-posted prompts on the internet and independent prompt creation from our use of ChatGPT to automating software development tasks. So that's time-stamped 31 minutes. Well, we'll call it 32 minutes. So we just went through the first section of a prompt pattern catalog to enhance prompt engineering with ChatGPT. This is a paper from Q1 2023. Right now, this is being filmed in and recorded in Q1 of 2025. Wow, how time flies. Just under, or is it just over? Yeah, this is actually, this is being recorded on February the 23rd. So we're about 2 days from the 2-year anniversary of this paper. So check in to the extent that there's an update and there's a better paper describing this, but even still, even 2 years in, this paper is still super relevant to those just getting started in building a contextual understanding of what large language models are, but more specifically how to interact with them in terms of prompt engineering by creating and utilizing a framework of patterns to be able to think about and to create an association. So this is, we're going to save going into the second section. Actually, wait, did we do? So we did section number 1. And then we did section number 2. And then, okay, so I guess in a future video, we'll go into section number 3. But I want to leave you with this table for classifying prompt patterns. The pattern category. So these are all the different pattern categories that they include within this paper. Input semantics. Output customization. Error identification. Prompt improvement. Interaction. And context control. And this is a list of the prompt pattern as an association with the prompt, or excuse me, as an association with the pattern category. Okay, so for input semantics, we have meta language creation. For output customization, we have output automator. We have persona. We have visualization generator. We have recipe. We have template. For error identification, we have fact check list. We have reflection. Next, for prompt improvement, the prompt pattern listed includes question refinement, alternative approaches, cognitive verifier, refusal breaker. For the pattern category of interaction, we have flipped interaction as a prompt pattern. We have gameplay as a prompt pattern. And we have infinite generation as a prompt pattern. So our last pattern category is context control, and the prompt pattern for this pattern category is context manager. Okay, in a future video, we will take steps to go through different segments, instances, and aspects where we found to be important to cite and to describe in the context of this body of work. Okay, so this channel is as an aggregator. So on our journey, our purpose really is to bring forth content curation and to describe and to speak about our experience as a content consumer. So we found utilizing large language models to help us become a content creator more effectively. So yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, add this video to a playlist. Remember, it starts with a title. Also, if you look on your screen right now, you might see a card including a link to a playlist. You might see an end card with a link to other playlists. We're probably going to link one of our first, what is it called? We're probably going to link our playlist on our AI playlist, our AI culture commentary playlist, our ChatGPT first mover playlist. In terms of this, we used this playlist, I think it was about a year long, where in the wake of ChatGPT, as a curator, we started just adding videos from our Consume Digest, from our YouTube hypergraph that we found interesting, that we found useful, and we might talk about it in a future video. So that's where I wanted to leave things off. This has been a content product in terms of as an aggregator. Until next time. As an aggregator, this is an outro for As an Aggregator. As an Aggregator is a channel designed around connecting consumers to content, one edge at a time. And no better way to start than to start with this as a hypergraph reference. So I hope you enjoyed this.